Welcome to the Avoidant Effect, where we uncover the hidden emotions, behaviors, and attachment patterns behind avoidant relationships and help you understand what's really happening beneath the surface. What if the strongest sign an avoidant truly loves you isn't what they say, but what they slowly begin doing differently? When someone who fears closeness starts choosing vulnerability, communication, and connection despite their fears, that change can reveal more than words ever could. Today we're breaking down the subtle signs that show you may truly be the person they don't want to lose. When an avoidant person genuinely develops deep feelings for you, one of the first things you may notice isn't complete emotional comfort. It's conflict inside them. The relationship matters enough to bring fears to the surface that they've spent years learning to suppress. In the beginning, everything may feel surprisingly easy. You connect deeply, conversations flow, and being together can feel peaceful and natural. Then, just when you think the relationship has finally settled, they suddenly become distant. Their messages slow down, their energy changes, and they seem harder to reach. It's easy to interpret that as rejection. But with avoidant attachment, distance can sometimes appear precisely when the relationship starts becoming emotionally significant. Their experience of love may move in cycles. They come closer, become vulnerable, feel exposed, and then retreat to regain a sense of control. Later, when the emotional intensity settles, they may find their way back. That's why you shouldn't judge the entire relationship only by the moments when they pull away. Pay attention to what happens when they return. Are they slightly more open? Are they communicating a little more honestly? Are they staying present longer than they used to? Are they making more effort to maintain the connection? Those small differences can tell you much more than one period of silence. Sometimes a meaningful connection doesn't begin with certainty. It begins with questions, unexpected chemistry, long conversations, confusing pauses, and a feeling that something about this person is different. An avoidant may recognize that difference long before they're willing to admit it. They may joke about their feelings, change the subject, send mixed signals, or disappear when things become too emotionally intense. But underneath those defenses, they may be experiencing something unfamiliar, feeling deeply understood while also feeling exposed. You make them feel safe, but that safety can make vulnerability impossible to ignore, and that's where the internal struggle begins. For someone with avoidant attachment, deep intimacy can activate fears that existed long before you entered their life. They may worry about becoming dependent, losing their freedom, being controlled, or eventually being hurt after becoming emotionally invested. Ironically, those fears can become strongest when the relationship starts meaning the most, so they pull back. Their communication may become inconsistent. The warmth you experienced before suddenly seems to disappear. One day they're fully engaged, and the next they seem emotionally unreachable. Naturally, that can hurt. Your first instinct may be to chase the connection. You might send more messages, ask what happened, seek reassurance, or try harder to bring back the closeness. But pressure often makes an avoidant retreat further. The more intensely they feel pushed to explain themselves or immediately restore intimacy, the more trapped they may feel. This is where your response becomes important. Instead of reacting from fear, learn to respond from self-respect. Their temporary withdrawal doesn't automatically determine your worth or prove that their feelings are gone. You can give them space without abandoning your own standards. That isn't playing games. It isn't pretending you don't care. It's recognizing that healthy connection requires room for both people to regulate their emotions. For an avoidant, experiencing that kind of stability can be powerful. They can take space without being punished. They can return without facing emotional chaos. They can experience closeness without immediately feeling that their independence is disappearing. Eventually, you may notice a familiar cycle. They withdraw, process what they're feeling, and then reconnect. But here's the important distinction. A return by itself isn't proof of healthy progress. Look at what changes between each cycle. If they come back with more honesty, better communication, greater accountability, or a stronger willingness to remain connected, that's meaningful. Maybe their periods of withdrawal become shorter. Maybe they apologize instead of pretending nothing happened. Maybe they share something vulnerable that they would have hidden before. Maybe they communicate that they need space rather than simply disappearing. Those changes may seem small, but emotional growth often happens exactly that way. If every cycle produces the same pain with no responsibility, no communication, and no improvement, then the pattern isn't healing. But when each return brings even a little more openness, the relationship may be moving forward. Over time, the avoidant can begin learning through experience that intimacy doesn't automatically mean losing independence. They discover that needing someone doesn't make them weak. Asking for space doesn't have to destroy a relationship. And returning to connection doesn't have to result in pressure or punishment. That understanding isn't created by convincing them with words. It develops through repeated experiences of healthy connection. They step back and discover the relationship doesn't collapse. They ask for space and discover their partner can respect it. They return and find consistency instead of emotional chaos. Little by little, their nervous system begins learning something their old defenses never allowed them to believe. Closeness can be safe. Little by little, they begin discovering that intimacy doesn't mean losing themselves. Being close to another person doesn't have to take away their freedom or trap them inside a relationship. As that realization becomes more familiar, the defenses they've carried for years can slowly begin to loosen. You probably won't see this through some huge romantic confession. More often, you'll notice it in ordinary moments. They stay in a difficult conversation instead of immediately shutting down. They answer your questions more honestly. Their tone becomes softer. They begin telling you things they once would have kept completely private. They may even start showing you that you're on their mind when you aren't together. Those small changes are how trust develops with someone who has learned to protect themselves through distance. Trust isn't created by making endless promises or repeatedly demanding reassurance. It develops when someone experiences the same emotional safety again and again and realizes that vulnerability doesn't automatically lead to rejection, control, or loss of independence. Eventually, the distance may still exist, but it feels different. They might still need space, but they don't disappear in the same way. When they return, they seem less guarded. Their communication feels more sincere. Their defenses aren't quite as strong. That progress can be easy to miss because it isn't dramatic, but quiet progress is still progress. And while they're learning to become more comfortable with closeness, you're being challenged to grow as well. You may have once believed that finally getting their commitment would solve your anxiety. You might have thought that if they consistently chose you, you'd finally feel completely secure. Over time, you learn something more important. Your emotional stability cannot depend entirely on how available they are on a particular day. If they're affectionate, you feel good. If they become distant, you shouldn't suddenly question your value. Their emotional rhythm doesn't have to control your self-worth. Instead, you begin building stability within yourself. You develop your own routines, interests, friendships, goals, and emotional grounding. That doesn't mean you care less. It means you stop disappearing inside the relationship just to keep it alive. You can love them deeply while still maintaining your identity. You can communicate your needs without turning every difficult moment into a crisis. You can give space without abandoning yourself. That kind of emotional independence creates a healthier environment for both people. An avoidant partner is also more likely to remain engaged when they aren't made responsible for another person's entire emotional world. If you constantly sacrifice your boundaries, ignore your needs, or expect them to regulate your emotions for you, the relationship can eventually feel overwhelming. But when both people remain grounded, the connection becomes lighter. Instead of communicating, "I need you to stay close so I can feel okay," your behavior communicates something much healthier. "I love having you in my life, but I still know who I am without you." That difference can transform the entire relationship. It also means you stop trying to rescue them from their attachment patterns. Their healing is their responsibility. Your healing is yours. A healthy relationship requires both people to recognize their own patterns and work on them. The avoidant may begin noticing when fear is making them withdraw. They may become more honest about needing space instead of disappearing without explanation. They may start acknowledging their emotional shutdown rather than pretending nothing happened. And your growth matters just as much. You stop treating every pause as proof that you're being abandoned. You learn to separate genuine warning signs from anxiety. You allow healthy space without becoming cold yourself. You remain caring without trying to control every outcome. That's where real progress begins. It isn't dramatic. It doesn't always feel exciting, but it is sustainable. Eventually, you may notice a change that almost happens quietly enough to miss. The silence that once lasted weeks may become a day or two. They may reach out first without needing a perfect excuse. They may share something vulnerable without being pushed. They may stay present during difficult conversations instead of immediately escaping. Most importantly, they begin choosing closeness rather than simply tolerating it. And that distinction is huge. Tolerating intimacy means staying nearby while still preparing to escape. Choosing intimacy means becoming willing to remain emotionally present even when vulnerability feels uncomfortable. When that shift happens, the relationship starts to feel different. It may still have challenges, but you're no longer carrying the entire emotional weight alone. Their effort begins moving toward you instead of always requiring you to chase it. Their return feels less like loneliness pulling them back and more like a conscious recognition that the relationship matters. And eventually you may realize something powerful. The relationship didn't become healthier because everything suddenly became easy. It became healthier because both people changed how they participated in it. So if you're dealing with an avoidant who repeatedly leaves and returns, don't judge the entire relationship simply by the fact that they come back. Coming back alone doesn't prove growth. The real question is whether the pattern is changing. Are they becoming more honest? Are they staying connected longer? Are they taking responsibility? Are you becoming more secure rather than more anxious? Are both of you learning to choose connection without losing yourselves? Those are the signs that tell you whether the relationship is actually evolving. When an avoidant comes back, don't focus only on the fact that they returned. Look at what their return actually brings with it. Are they more open than before? Are they taking responsibility for what happened? Are conversations becoming clearer, or are you left with even more questions? Have they learned to tell you when they need space, or are you still left guessing while they disappear? These details matter far more than the return itself. Real progress isn't repeating the same cycle. It's changing what happens inside the cycle. And you need to ask yourself some equally important questions. Are you becoming calmer, stronger, and more secure within yourself? Or are you becoming more anxious, drained, and disconnected from who you used to be? A relationship can either help two people grow or slowly wear them down. If every difficult period eventually creates more trust, better communication, stronger emotional control, and greater responsibility from both sides, then something healthy may be developing. But if every cycle leaves you more confused, more exhausted, and more willing to accept inconsistency simply because you call it love, then it may be time to reconsider whether staying is actually helping you. Strong emotions aren't enough to prove that a relationship is healthy. Intensity and progress are two completely different things. And when an avoidant returns, don't assume they've suddenly overcome every fear they have. They may still become overwhelmed. They may still need time alone. Old habits may still appear from time to time. The real difference is what happens when those moments occur. Growth looks like greater honesty, clearer communication, accountability, and a shared willingness to protect the connection rather than allowing fear to control it. So instead of asking only, how strongly do we feel about each other? Ask, where is this relationship going? Direction often tells you what intensity cannot. If the relationship is gradually moving toward more trust, respect, stability, and emotional safety, that's meaningful. And even healthy relationships involving avoidant attachment won't become completely free of difficult moments. There may still be days when they retreat inward or struggle to process what they're feeling. But a setback doesn't have to erase months of progress. An avoidant who is genuinely developing emotionally may still need space, but they become better at communicating that need. They may still feel overwhelmed, but they don't intentionally leave you trapped in uncertainty for endless periods. Eventually, they begin learning that the relationship can be a place of support rather than something they constantly have to escape. Your growth matters just as much. You may still feel hurt when they pull away, but you recover differently. Instead of immediately assuming you've been rejected, you pause. You separate facts from fear. You communicate instead of reacting impulsively. Your boundaries become clearer, your emotional regulation becomes stronger, and you become more comfortable expressing your needs without demanding immediate reassurance. That's what emotional maturity actually looks like. It doesn't mean creating a relationship without conflict. It means two imperfect people becoming better at handling conflict without allowing fear to make every decision for them. But there's one boundary you should never lose sight of. Patience must not become self-betrayal. Being compassionate toward an avoidant doesn't mean accepting neglect, inconsistency, or emotional unavailability forever. Healthy patience says, I understand that this is difficult for you, but communication still matters. It says, I can respect your need for space while still expecting respect and honesty. Healing takes time, but time by itself doesn't create healing. Effort does. This is where many people lose themselves. They become so focused on understanding the other person's fears that they start excusing behavior that never changes. They keep waiting for some future version of the relationship while ignoring what is actually happening in the present. That's when compassion becomes self-abandonment. If a relationship is genuinely becoming healthier, you should eventually see some evidence of movement. Maybe they're more honest. Maybe they're more accountable. Maybe they're more willing to communicate. Maybe their consistency has improved. Maybe they're becoming more courageous with vulnerability. The progress can be slow and still be real, but slow progress is completely different from repeating the exact same pattern forever. So keep your heart open, but keep your eyes open too. Love should help you grow without requiring you to erase yourself. If maintaining the relationship continually costs you your peace while producing no meaningful change, that's something worth questioning. Relationship IPs involving avoidant attachment can become powerful mirrors for both people. The avoidant may be forced to confront fears they've spent years protecting themselves from. And you may be forced to confront your own fears around rejection, abandonment, being chosen, or feeling worthy of love. Sometimes the relationship reveals parts of yourself that a simpler connection never would have exposed. That doesn't automatically mean the relationship is meant to last forever, but it can mean the experience is teaching both people something important. The real question is whether you're both using that awareness to grow or simply using it to justify staying stuck. Personal growth is valuable, but it doesn't mean you must stay in a relationship forever. Pain alone doesn't make a connection healthy. What matters is whether that growth creates something better between both people. When both partners become more honest, secure, accountable, and willing to contribute, the relationship can slowly become healthier. But if only one person keeps doing the emotional work while the other remains trapped in avoidance, the relationship may simply be teaching you how to choose yourself. A relationship can transform you without being meant to last forever. When genuine security begins developing, everything feels different. There is less confusion, less anxiety, and less need to analyze every silence. The avoidant becomes more comfortable with closeness, while you become more grounded in yourself. Trust begins replacing fear. The relationship becomes stronger through small choices, communicating instead of disappearing, listening instead of assuming, respecting boundaries, and returning with greater honesty. So don't judge the future by chemistry or intensity alone. Ask whether both of you are growing healthier together. Are they becoming more accountable? Are you becoming more secure? Is communication improving? Is the emotional effort becoming mutual? Real potential appears when two people Repeatedly choose growth over fear and learn to move toward each other instead of waiting for the other person to change. At the end of the day, don't measure an avoidance love by how often they pull away, but by whether they grow, communicate, and keep choosing the relationship. Real love becomes visible when fear no longer controls every decision, and both people begin moving toward each other with greater honesty, trust, and emotional responsibility.